like Neil Gaiman? Yeah, love him. Okay, so it'll be good tonight then. No?
Very excited.
What?
Delicious. Amazing, and we're looking forward to hearing him speak. Meeting him! Yay!
Neil Gaiman?
No Gaiman. Oh, amazing.
Early last year, when my wife, Amanda, went to Melbourne, Australia to make an album, and she was going to be there for 4 months. And I missed her. And I thought, you know, I will write her a short story. I'll write her a little personal short story because she's not really very big on fantasy. I mean, she sort of puts up with it for me. But really what she likes is, she likes things that feel real world, and she likes honesty, and she likes emotions, and she likes you. And I thought, I'll write a story for her that'll be sort of my weird little, you know, I miss you love letter. Here's a little portrait, little story about when I was 7, but it's not really deep. It'll be a me-ish kind of text. And that was the place I came into it from. And the story didn't stop. You know, I started writing it, and then I carried on writing it, and then after a week or so, maybe 2 weeks, I went, this is obviously not a short story. I think as a kid, you're essentially wandering around in a foreign land. Or at least a land with a peculiar kind of occupying power who are there to think about. You're not issued with instruction manual. The occupying forces are capricious. They speak your language, but they also speak their own language, which you do not always understand. And they behave in ways that are not always entirely comprehensible to you. And I wanted to try and get, initially I guess what I was going for was to try and get the feelings that you get when you're a kid, the ways of thinking that you have as a kid that probably don't last into adulthood. There's a moment in the book where our 7-year-old protagonist ponders the fact that, you know, adults stick to the path. Children make their own paths, they explore. He knows at one point he needs to get away from his house. He knows it does in different ways, including going under the rhododendrons and through the laurel bushes and how you get out. And it's true, when was the last time you saw an adult down on their hands and knees crawling through the rhododendrons just to figure out if there was a path? My favourite, without trying to give too much away, things that happen later in the book, because you haven't read it yet, because technically it doesn't get published on Tuesday. You're all getting advanced copies now, and thus spoiling the entire world. There is a character in the book called Ursula Moncton, or, as she is referred to quite often in the text, the thing that calls itself Ursula Moncton. You know, I long ago observed that people who wrote horror, and this was back when I was a young journalist interviewing people for a living, in the same way that comedians off stage, when you get to know them, tend to be rather slightly depressed, slightly introverted people who don't actually laugh very much, and who are given to going, oh, that's funny. If they can hear something funny, which is a terrible thing. People who write horror are the most cheerful people in the world. They're these happy, rotund, red-faced people. They're full of the joys of spring. They're cheerful. They have all of the joy that comedians lack. And I'm convinced it's because people who write horror, and I wouldn't class this book as horror, although that's a scary romance, actually do get to sort of pull the stuff out of there and put it on the page, and it goes off and destroys other people's lives. And who scares me? Yeah, there were writers out there whose work scares me. Robert Aikman would occasionally scare me in some of his stranger short stories. Stephen King, bless him, at his best, can still scare me. And his clone war offspring, Joe Hill. I'm convinced that Joe actually was just grown. Stephen probably cut off a finger and planted it, and Joe pushed it away. It's not true. I got to the end of Carlisle, and I felt like somehow I created a shape of a story that felt right. It felt like I'd always known it, except I hadn't known it before I wrote it. Okay, so people, if anyone wants to ask a question, get there. There's thousands of you.
Hi. You've done every sort of storytelling race, like from movies, comic books, comics. Have you ever considered writing a story for a video game?
Yes, I have. Back in the 1990s, I was actually approached by a number of video game companies and started working on several of them. And one by one, every time, what would actually happen is I do a bunch of work, and then the company would go bankrupt. I really love the Norse myths. I think because they're doomed. And it adds a sort of a layer to most myths don't have proper endings. And if they do have endings, all the good guys survive. And, you know, you run into the book of Revelations, and yes, there's going to be a giant apocalyptic thingy, but all the good guys just hang out at the end. It's easy. And what I love about the Norse is they're doomed, and they're really grumpy. The only one that I really like is Loki, and then it becomes more and more bastard. As goes on, and he turns up in part of one of the areas, I think called Loki's Flighting, where he gets drunk and comes in at dinner, and it's just like, well, you're shagging anything, and you're stupid, and it just insults them all. Relatively accurate. After that, he's doing his seal. I love the idea that a lot of the stories that we wind up with started out as religion, started out as sacred things. And then sort of, you start out with sacred mysteries, and then they rot down a little bit and become myths. And then they rot down and become fairy stories. You know, the joy of getting to write episodes of Doctor Who is you get to be the Doctor in your head while you're doing it. I remember saying that I'd never actually really known what it was to feel like God until the moment I got to write Interior TARDIS. The power was astounding. Do you know that there are myths about Jesus? Anybody do know? Have you ever heard of the Gospel of the Infancy of Christ? Thomas's Gospel. Great fun. It's basically all of the stories, it's the adventures of Jesus Christ when he was a boy. It's from the 2nd or 3rd century. He makes clay birds, brings them to life at one point. he knocks, a kid is knocked off the roof in the diaries, so Jesus just brings him back to life. Because he's accused of having knocked him off the roof, and the kid goes, it wasn't Jesus, it was him. He does all these sort of effective, 7-year-old miracles. But he also keeps killing people. Anybody who pisses him off gets it. Sometimes they just go blind. There's a teacher who raises his hand, striking his arm just withers, obviously.